Let's talk about the business of the day as it relates to theater with your hosts, Darnelle Radford and Mitch Weiss. This is The Business of Theater, a working title. Mitch, I know we were looking for a working title, but we cannot name the podcast The Business of Theater. I'm on the board and I'm bored.
I think that would be a phenomenal subtitle. You finally hit one I'm in favor of.
Well, I thought this one would be fitting because we have a guest with us today, author Alan Harrison, who we chatted with earlier in the season about his first book, Scene Change. Let me get the full title here. Scene Change: Why Today's Nonprofit Arts Organizations Have to Stop Producing Art and Start Producing Impact. We had a great chat about that book, and now there's a second book coming. It's Scene Change 2. Why Today's Nonprofit Arts... Scene Change 2. The 5 real responsibilities of nonprofit arts boards. And so that's the next one. So this one's all about boards. And so we are here in the virtual studio with Alan Harrison. Alan, welcome back to the podcast.
Welcome, Alan.
Thank you. It's great to be here again.
So I assume you've been writing since we've chatted.
Oh, quite a lot. I do this. I also have a weekly blog that shows up on artsjournal.com. Which
we read constantly.
Oh, well,
yes,
thank you for that. It's one of the only great big aggregators of arts news from around the world.
Right.
And it's a wonderful project that's run by Doug McClellan. And Doug is...
most important, it's free.
And it is free.
People who have any interest in making sure they're knowledgeable about the arts world and ideas should be subscribing to it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I tripped over his name, and he'll kill me if I don't just tell you that his name is Doug McClellan, and he is he's a marvelous person, but he's also
Doug
brilliantly
McClellan.
Smart and connected and gets really deep articles on this. And so I've been writing for Arts Journal Weekly for about, for more than a year, maybe 2. And I get most of my response from that particular thing. I also write, the same blog shows up on LinkedIn. And of course, it shows up on my own website, 501c3.guru. So there you go.
All right. You got in all the promotions. Good.
Well,
Yes.
for the blog, all of that's free, by the way. All of this is free.
Yeah. I love how you are fine with being called a guru, because for the longest time in nonprofit, I hated that. I was, I started out in as a production manager for a edutainment company. It was a nonprofit. And then I started taking over their IT stuff in the admin side, and they would always call me the IT guru, and it just annoyed me. I was like, there's a whole lot I don't know. I just happen to know more than everyone in the office.
Well, I think people, yeah, well, that's true. I think people generally that the tongue is placed firmly in cheek with a dot
Yes.
guru extension. It was, I couldn't get com or net or org or any of those things, and I saw a guru and I thought, well, that'd be funny. Let's do that.
Yeah. It works. I like it.
Speaking of which, about people getting the tongue-in-cheek part, are you finding that your articles, your blog, your writing is having an impact itself?
You know what it's having an impact on is that the people who are doing the work and by the work, and it's the work that was laid out in the first book, that we've actually gone into this septic whirlpool of doing art for art's sake, which is not a purpose in a nonprofit organization. In fact, as we talked about in the last show, arts are never mentioned in Section 501c3 of the IRS code. And so if you're just doing art and you're saying, hey, I'm doing art, isn't that enough? The IRS, the folks who gave you your letter that says that you're a charity, says no. And not only that, it isn't. Even if it were in there, it really isn't helping your community just by putting on art. Putting on art helps you, helps your artists, helps those people. But your people in your community is a much broader spectrum of people who need help, who actually do need help. And charities are there to do that help.
And Alan, always a wonderful point. But here's the argument that I've heard come back at me when I quote you, okay, or even go in that direction. And that is, what about the communities I'm going to arbitrarily pick Iowa for no reason. A small community in Iowa which has no live anything, and their theater company brings them some form of live entertainment in the form of theater. Is that not providing a service to their community?
Technically speaking, no. You can make the argument that it becomes an educational process for people who have never experienced the arts and can get, but you're never going to prove that the art that you provide has increased the services for the underserved in your community, even if you're in a small Iowan community like that. Here's the deal. There's no moral high ground to running a nonprofit. You run a nonprofit, run a for-profit, run a commercial organization, run a community theater, perhaps, and now you're bringing in the waiting for government thing, where you're bringing in the dentist and the travel agent and whomever. That could be construed as a community experience because it fills a need that the community doesn't have, and it is one of those things that is mentioned in Section 501c3. But as soon as you make it a performance-only item, we're going to do Steel Magnolias for you. Well, there's no difference between what you would do and what a commercial organization would do. Therefore, you've become a commercial organization, and you better, you have to respond to that. Now, the reality part of that is no one's going to take away your 501c3. The IRS doesn't have people out there gunning for 501c3s unless there's really horrible corruption going on. And even then, it takes quite a while to make something happen and a lot of legwork. They just don't have the legs.
I'm not sure I can even name somebody who's ever had their 501c taken away.
Well, there's one guy, and it was a foundation that was run by this orange fellow in New York, and he had his 501c3 taken away. It took a long time.
Yeah. The school, his university.
Well, not just the school, the whole foundation, it turned out was just, it was just a conduit.
Well, that was something I was going to bring up. There are for-profit companies who start a nonprofit entity to, do good in the community. Like, like Ben and Jerry's, for example. Like, they are, I don't know if they are completely a nonprofit.
No, they're not at all a nonprofit, actually.
No. And now they are owned by someone now. Yes, but they do have this philanthropy sort of, program that they go out into the world with. And I always wonder, because a lot of smaller companies, they start out as corporations because they might be fiscally sponsored first, and they don't have the 501c3 status yet. And there's always a conversation in that moment that's like, perhaps we just stay in this.
I know one in Philadelphia.
Then there's a conversation about getting.
I know one in Philadelphia that could easily be a 501c3 based on, everybody around. But he said, no, I really just want to do performances, and there's no harm in that as long as I don't take the community's money. See, that's the thing.
Yeah.
That's where if you think it's just an arbitrary discussion, it's not. The 501c3 causes or allows your company to be tax exempt in many ways. Not all of them. It's state by state, but a whole bunch of them, and certainly on a federal level. Well, those taxes still have to be paid. So who do you think is paying them? They're paid by the people who live in the state that issued the 501c3. And for the most part, 99% of the charities out there are perfectly legit. And so I can say that, it's okay that my money, even though I'm not directly donating, I can say it's okay that my money is going to a food bank or going to the Red Cross or going to any number of places. Frankly, my money is going to the NRA. Okay, they exist as a 501c3 in the state of Washington where I live. I don't like them particularly. I don't really want them, but if that's the price I have to pay, that's fine. Okay. Where it comes into a problem is the other side of the NRA argument, where they were actually just selling stuff and they were doing all of the wrong things about, lobbying at the government. You can lobby. You're allowed to lobby. You're not allowed to back a candidate. So they were doing that, and they shouldn't have been doing it. But the Planned Parenthood, whatever, any 501c3 in your state, you're paying for. It may be pennies, but you're paying for it. And that makes you the owner. The board is not the owner. And we talk about this in Scene Change 2. The board is not the owner. Certainly the executive director or the artistic director, they're not the owners. The audience is not the owner. The donors are not the owner. The owner are the people of the state in which you do business.
And Alan, with the exception of your book, to my knowledge, there is no place that the artistic directors, the executive directors of the board, or even the community is educated to know that. They go in there, in my less than humble opinion, many artistic directors certainly go into theater, nonprofit theater, as if it's their personal playground. And then, which always drives me personally crazy, okay, our tickets are $40 or less, but we're going to beg you for money, so when you give me another $200 donation, actually you just paid $240 for your tickets, not $40. So why are you telling me I'm getting a discount? You might as well just say the tickets cost $240 and we're on Broadway, and that's the name of the game.
If that's all you're doing, that's exactly right. If all you're doing is following your own artistic vision, which is the worst phrase, it's a horrible phrase to have a single person's artistic vision running your company. That's just dumb. That's, if you're a charity, it's dumb. If you're, Apple, then that was fine. Yeah. They're not a nonprofit. They're not taking your money, but you're taking my money and you're following this artistic vision. And you think that's a good thing, which is also funny, but it's it's the Pied Piper they're over the cliff now with the lemmings. I mean, it's and that's why they're all closed. Cal Shakespeare just closed, huge organization in San Francisco.
Heartbreaking.
Yes.
So I know
it's exactly what they did. Was they followed an artistic vision, and they didn't really know why. I wrote this book in response to a survey that I put out because it was following my own advice and using the scientific method. That thing that we all learned in 5th or 6th grade science. But I actually used it for this. And I said, okay, my hypothesis is exactly the same as yours, Mitch. They really don't know why they're there, the board members. So I wonder if that's true. And so I sent out a survey. I got 600 responses from board members of arts organizations across the country. And it was all anonymous. There's no name attached to any of the answers. And even on the rare occasion where somebody would write their name, I would I threw out the cards so that there was nothing traceable. And I asked them 3 questions. The questions were, what is your most important responsibility? Your single most important responsibility as a board member? What is your board's single most important responsibility? And if you had to pick one, what single responsibility is your board currently lacking? I asked them to write 6 words or less so that I could categorize them more easily, and also to get them to the point. So I didn't want stories about, well, in 1943 when I joined this board. As a result, what I got basically was that people thought their single most important responsibility was raising money, and the thing that they were lacking was raising money. They said the board's responsibility was to raise money. That seemed to be number 1 on all the lists. But here's the deal. When I dug a little deeper and contacted a few of them for some qualitative information, I got back that raising money really meant write a check. It didn't mean going out into the community and talking to your friends and all that. It meant write a check. It meant invite people to the gala. It meant it's that kind of thing. It had nothing to do with proselytizing at all.
Because that is extremely difficult, and most people, myself included, find it distasteful and find it difficult, if not impossible. So it becomes, at least if I get you to come to a dinner, you're getting something for your money. But just going out and trying to involve the community to give money for some art form that they already don't buy tickets to, right?
Right.
So what did you get anybody from that survey who, quote unquote, got it, understood what you were saying?
Very few. Because, I didn't go into any background. That's it. That was the entirety of the thing with those 3 questions. But for some of them said governance. I know people don't know what governance means. It's just a word that somebody told them somewhere along the line. There's a really good book out there that was put out by, I think it's still put out by Board Source. It's a good book. It's very, very skinny. And it's called 10 Important Responsibilities for Nonprofit Boards, just all nonprofits.
I actually, it's been a long time, but I read that.
Sure. Everybody had to. And it was, as it stands, it's a pretty good book. It just doesn't speak to the arts people because there's an assumption in the book that you already know why you're there, that you have some passion over the outcomes, not about the activities, but about the outcomes based on what your charity is doing. Oh, we fed 100,000 people last year. That's an outcome. Who didn't have food otherwise. Not only that, but 40,000 of them have jobs now because they use our food bank nonprofit, let's say, as a scaffold to get them to a point where they could get back into the community. And now they have jobs and they're paying taxes and they have roofs over their heads and all that stuff. That's what you're looking for as an outcome. You're not looking for, we have the prettiest shelves and our food delivery system is number 1.
Right. Alan, I have to ask you this because these are, again, responses I get from various people to the notion of what nonprofit is supposed to do. Mm-hmm. And one of the kind of more interesting responses I had from 2 friends in the industry was, well, what about the fact that theatrical artists, whether they're designers or actors or writers or whatever, theatrical artists suffer, they make very little money, and if our mission is really we're helping them in their art form present ideas that then the audience is going to learn from as well as be entertained. It was a whole thing about we are an insulated and isolated community of ourselves. How do you respond to that?
So the first thing I say to people who talk about that is the obvious, which is that artists have always starved. They have always suffered. They have always worked much harder at their art than have been paid for. You know, all those paintings that Van Gogh sold, did he sell any? Was there one maybe? Probably for rent.
I don't think so.
Yeah. So not that that's good or bad or anything. That's just the fact. So the fact that all of a sudden, but we employ artists. The second part of that is the real pushback is not that so much. This is the pushback. Oh, so you're employing artists. Well, employment of artists is for your benefit, not for the artist's benefit. Otherwise, you wouldn't negotiate their salaries down every time there's a union negotiation. You would say, no. They have to be paid well. They have to be paid as much as I am or more.
Yeah.
So there's no love of artists except that it's convenient and important. They're important cogs in the wheel. I don't mean to put it as gruffly as that, of the arts organization. That's what they are. It's part of economy 101. It's capitalism 101. You try and pay as little as you possibly can for your workers and for your stuff so that the profits come out better. In this case, so that the surplus comes out better. But no, they don't. They say that. That's really lovely talk, that we support our artists. You don't. You're just paying them for doing work for you.
And that's the key thing, is that was really the answer that was the response, is that if anyone's goal is to support artists because it is such a tough life, the truth is nonprofits don't support.
No.
They employ artists.
That's exactly right.
And then they kick them away.
That's right. They're gone when they're not useful anymore.
That's right.
And that is, I don't mean to say that that's a special thing. That's every business in the United States of America. Employs people, and then if they're not working out anymore, they're gone. And in fact, there was this idea years ago that your parents, both of you probably went through this, where you worked for a company for 30, 40 years. It's long gone. The idea that's going to happen. I mean, that's gone a generation ago. That was gone. So this idea that we support artists is, I'll use a nice word. Let's see, hodswallop. It's balderdash. It's bourgeois. And if they really believe that, then they fooled themselves.
Okay. Off topic for a second.
Sure.
Do you have an opinion or a philosophy about how a society can actually support artists?
I've yet to see one. There are some places that do. Here's what I believe. I believe that if you really want to support artists, let me back up and give you an example and show you why that's the case. Here in King County, Washington, where Seattle is located, King County has passed a 0.25% sales tax for the arts. And I put that in quotes because it's really going to be managed by the county's arts commission, which is called For Culture. For Culture, with a 4, not a F-O-R. For Culture is going to manage the money. They're not going to do much more than that. But ultimately, what they'll do is they'll give the money to the largest organizations. And what they're enacting is a trickle-down method of supporting artists. That if we support these arts organizations, somehow some of that money will trickle down to the artists. Well, the truth, we all know the truth on that. We've seen it before. When you give lots of money to a large organization, maybe they'll hire a ninth actor for a play, or they'll hire, they'll use the whole orchestra for a change, or or more likely they'll hire a marketing person or a development person, or the worst word in the history of words, the outreach person, to show that, see, we're out there, we're trying to have better art. Inevitably, the money ends up going back into the organization, and oddly enough, CEOs of a lot of large arts organizations are making a hideously high salary in comparison to the budget of the organization. And what they're doing is that they're talking to their corporate leaders on their boards who already have that as a model, where the CEO gets an insane amount of money. And so they're saying, see, if you want to keep me, you're going to have to do for me what you would do for the head of, GM.
Right.
So the money isn't going to the artists. It's going to be $150, $200 million a year that is not going to end up in the pockets of artists. Now, if they had taken that $200 million, if they changed their minds about how they're going to manage it and say, you know what, we're going to put this money against federal money for housing, and some federal and some state money for housing, or something like that, get matches, actually work to get matches, and work it up to, say, $500,000 or more, say $1 million, buy a freaking building and put artists in it. Subsidized housing for artists has proven to be one of the best ideas for any city, any region that has an artist issue, that has artists in it. Seattle is.
I was just talking about this week.
And let me support that. I live in one of those buildings in New York.
You live in Manhattan Plaza?
Yep.
Yep. See, that's the gold standard.
And I don't understand, with all the talking about housing needs and let's do an 80-20 or let's do a this or that, why this isn't the best example for everyone to follow, because it works beautifully. And we have a commercial realtor running the building now, not the government, and they still make a profit, even though artists are being subsidized or on a bad year and not subsidized on a good year. Duh. It goes up and down. And it is run beautifully. Everyone's happy being here. We have rich people. We have poor people. It's all mixed together. Some years you are rich. Some years you aren't. That's what the arts are about. And this building, or two buildings, are the only ones I know of that work this way. And I cannot get our politicians to follow this example.
So I'd say here in Philadelphia, on the Avenue of the Arts, you'll have the Kimmel Center for the Performing Arts. You'll have the Miller Theater. You have Wilma Theater, and then they are surrounded by luxury high rises. And the question, as we were watching them come up, it's like, who are these for? They're not for Philadelphians. They're for people who don't live here yet. And there's one place right across from the Kimmel Center. It's called Art House, spelled Haus, and it has units that are going for $1.5 million. And so if the Kimmel Center, before it got its name from Sydney,
how
was
many
called
people
the
out there
Regional
think it's the
Performing
Jimmy
Arts
Kimmel
Center.
Center? That's the funny part.
Maybe. I don't know. I feel like Philly's kind of
savvy, related, right?
I feel like Philly's kind of savvy on who's notable in the city, but that'd be interesting. I don't know that he's ever been there. Yeah. Has Jimmy Kimmel ever been there? That would be a good.
So the question, okay, Alan. So how? I mean, this is what your new book is about. How do we make the alterations or the enhancements or the total revision of what board members come on board to do, that they get an understanding of it? And how does somebody coming up from college and about to enter the nonprofit world at a theater company help design the board? How do we change this?
Yeah. The first thing that has to happen is they have to read good books. This is a pretty good book. I just reread it again. I hadn't read it for a couple of weeks, and it's a pretty good book when it comes to this kind of stuff. I'm happy to say because it reads quickly. Let me tell you, you breeze through this thing. Because I don't like all the falderall, and I don't like to, I like analogies, but I don't like to write whole chapters on things. Anyway, the material isn't really out there for the nonprofit business person. You have to adapt for-profit business books to a nonprofit idea. That's okay. That's okay for, how to do finances, how to make a spreadsheet, how to make a balance sheet, how to do your that. That stuff doesn't change between nonprofits and for-profits. What changes is that the impact for nonprofits of all kinds, including the arts, is the coin of the realm, not cash. So in a for-profit business, cash is the coin. I mean, it's literally the coin of the realm. It is, you're either making a profit or you're not. And it's how much profit and where do the profits go? And it's about the money. It may also be about a product for which somebody has some passion, and that helps bring in the money. So that's Apple right there. He had passion over the project. People there have sort of cult-like following, a passion over the product. But ultimately, it's about, we just made a boatload of money. In nonprofit arts organizations and all the other nonprofits, the impact on the community is the coin of the realm. I don't care if a company ends up in Reading for a year, as long as I would care if that company no longer served people. If they're running a surplus because they didn't do anything but put on plays, if the Red Cross did a surplus because they never went to any more wildfires or natural disasters or blood banks or anything, those cost money, so we'll just cut that, and then we'll show a profit and we'll show how good an organization we are. That's not how you prove how a nonprofit organization is. And once they understand that, the rest really falls into place. So you mentioned it earlier, artistic directors are not trained in how to be an artistic director. There's very little information on how to do that. It's passed on from generation to generation, which means that these toxic relationships get passed on from generation to generation. These toxic work job descriptions. The idea that one of my favorite is that the idea that the artistic director may, in a theater, may direct 4 or 5 plays. Well, that takes them right out of the organization for about 4 to 5 plays worth of rehearsal periods and opening nights, and then they have to recover from that. Meanwhile, there are a litany of responsibilities that an artistic director has to do if they are running the organization. So during those weeks, they end up saying, talk to my managing director, or talk to this, or I'll get back to you. And it becomes a terrible experience because even the rest of the staff can see, this is untenable. And it's part of the reason you have a lot of churn happening lower in lower level. I think I'll go to another organization because this guy's driving me nuts, or woman. And it's the idea is, and I mention it in the book as an idea, as something to look at. Not necessarily, in fact, all of it is something to look at and something to talk about. Given every idea in this book, every discussion, it's loaded with discussion sheets for board members to use at their next board meeting. It's loaded with ideas and exercises to do, and they're all about breaking down the idea that we do it this way because we've always done it this way. One of the things that artistic directors have to acknowledge is that if they're going to run the company, they have to be available to the company the entire time that they're running the company. They can't direct a play. They can't do anything like that because it takes them away from their principal obligation. But if you really want them to direct the artistry of the organization, they can do that from an officer position. And then they're not answering the question about what the mission of the organization is. Because in an artist's mind, the mission, in an artistic leader's mind, what's good for me is what's good for the organization, what's good, and the reverse. But if you look at it from the community standpoint, ask the community what they want and really ask them and really, go into depth with all the leaders in your community and say, what is it that you need? Not what do you want, but what do you need? And you get all the answers and you try to apply the arts as a tool to solve or mitigate some of those problems. That's not really what artistic directors are good at. They're good at creating or manifesting art. So let them manifest art from an officer level, like a development officer and a marketing officer and a finance officer, and get them out of the being responsible for the entire company's existence. Then you have a board and executive director talking to the community, and it becomes entirely about the community and not at all about, which checkoff we should do tomorrow.
I just read in the blog from The Stage in the UK that's an argument being presented about Alan Cumming, who was just made an artistic director in England of a theater company. They're going, he's not going to run the organization. The man's never done anything like that. And then if he ends up directing something, he's not going to know which way to turn.
Right.
So why are they hurting the organization other than putting it in the news so that it can hopefully raise some more money off of his name?
Well, you just answered your question.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. They're also exploring, co-artistic director models where there's more than one artistic director, which basically kind of feels like an artist in residence. But it would be interesting to know, like, what artistic duties beyond choosing a show and directing it are you doing as a co-artistic director?
The issue with the co-art, and there are places with 3 and 4 co-artistic directors. I think that's more of of title inflation more than anything else. I think that there has to be somebody who responds to, were we able to achieve some sort of charitable impact by what we did? Not artistic impact, not the completely subjective term excellence. Artistic excellence is a crock, because my artistic excellence might be your bad shit. It's bad stuff. But so you can't base a company on that by saying that there's some empirical data that says, well, this is by definition excellent, because why? And it's not important. It didn't feed anybody, didn't house anybody, didn't solve any problems, didn't make the world a better place to live. Why don't you make the world a better place to live with your art, as long as you're going to be a nonprofit and take my money? That's what I want you to do. And the arts organizations themselves, in the main, argue the points that Mitch is saying he's hearing. But why? This is how we do things. We've never done it any other way. Well, you've never been trained to do it any other way. And meanwhile, there are organizations that are, in fact, acting community first. You just may not be hearing about them because they're not up for Tony Awards.
Well, and I'd like to bring up the fact that, because, again, I know a lot of artists are concerned about this. Everybody in the arts, as we all suffer, wants to be hired to do whatever it is they do, whether they're writing or acting, directing, whatever they're doing. So the question is, what organization is going to hire me, and should they have to pay taxes? And what if I'm putting this together myself as the writer? Here's my vanity production. I'm putting on a show that I wrote, and I'm bringing everyone together. And there are two things that I've discovered, is that one, on a one-to-one basis, if you're just doing your show, nobody cares. You don't need an organization. You just do it. So that doesn't become a tax thing. The second thing is, if you are trying to put an organization like that together, then the people who give you money, it can be commercial. They can own a piece of this. It doesn't have to be a donation. That you can say, hey, look, nothing may ever happen with this show. But if it does, you put money into it, you own something. And that becomes a commercial venture. And then pay your taxes if you make any money on it.
Sure. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right. And but I'm working on an organization that does that. So it actually, in my opinion, works. And I don't understand this feeling that artists believe it has to be a nonprofit or they're not going to get their chance out of college or their chance when they're 30 and they haven't made it yet. No, I'm serious. This is
I agree. I hear you.
And yet I get their needs because living here in New York, we have tens of thousands of talented people who aren't working. And they're looking to these organizations to give them a chance to show what they can do. And my thing is, well, then find somebody to work on whatever project you want, but pay your taxes if you make money. And if you don't make money, you're not going to owe money anyway.
It's what John Leguizamo did. It's what Whoopi Goldberg did.
Thank you.
There's a company in Philadelphia I was about to mention called SideQuest Theater. They are not a non-for-profit. They're not a non-for-profit. Meanwhile, they actually do good works for the community as well as the theater, but they didn't want to be hemmed in. And I say more power to them. They took investors they pay them back. And so then those people invest again. And it's a commercial business that is doing what everyone else would start a nonprofit to do.
Yeah. All right. So, Alan, first of all, congratulations on your books and thank you. You are one of the few voices out there. Absolutely. We encourage you. There's also there are links which, of course, Darnelle will put on with the podcast so that we encourage people to read this. We're talking about Christmas gifts here for board members. It wouldn't hurt, if two of them read it, then at least two of them read it.
Here's something toward that. It's going to come out in December. It is going to be, if you pre-order it, it'll be on your doorstep on the first day, right? I pushed the publisher on this one to lower the price point on it, so that people would buy 10 for their board, or they could. It's not a big. It's less than $12 a copy. It's less than $12 a copy. So there's really no excuse. And then, go anywhere, and they'll probably discount it anyway. But go to your I prefer go to your independent bookstore and do it that way, or go to bookshop.org.
Right.
But either way, however you do it, it's not a big expense. You're going to get something out of it. You're going to be able to change your organization just by doing the exercises with them. Just by sitting you'll probably get rid of the idea of having a retreat, because you'll treat every board meeting as though it were a retreat, rather than, one of the key elements of this book is that stop talking about the past at board meetings. That's not changeable. Board meetings cost a lot of money. If you calculate everybody's consulting fee for an hour and decide, even if you decide it's only $100 an hour per person, if there are 20 people in the room, that's $2,000 an hour. If you're going to spend $2,000 on your organization per hour, do you want to talk about the past or the future? It's a simple question. It's a simple response. Yeah. Okay, then let's talk about the future. So then the board report, the one that gets mailed out before the board meeting, becomes that report. And if there's anything to vote on, you do that in the first 5 minutes, and as a consent agenda. And then you move on to the meeting itself and talk about why things are going, who is going to get positively affected by the work that we do here.
On that note.
Yes. Well, Alan, I want to thank you for joining us today for a second time. It's always great to have you, because I feel like we're always talking to you, because we're reading your blog, and we're commenting, and sometimes the blog post fuels our conversation, and so I'll have links to all of the blog posts starting in September, leading up to right now, in the show notes, along with the link to 501c3.guru to learn more about Scene Change and Scene Change 2, the 5 real responsibilities of nonprofit arts boards. Alan, thank you so much for chatting with us today. And I will have to say that I'm actually excited about Scene Change 2 because I just joined 2 boards, one of which is a brand new theater company. And it started out, they picked my brain, and I talked to them for much longer than was intended. And it just kind of ended up that way.
And I'm sad
I'm interested to bring that book to them.
I'm sad to say I've quit 2 boards because your book hadn't come out yet, and they just don't get it. And there's no reason to sit there and advise them when they don't want to listen.
Yeah.
And that's
so always the way.
Books are very helpful. They get to soak it in first on their own time. That's how a book helps.
Well, just send them to the bookstore. I'm sure they'll pick up something. And I don't even ask for people to agree with me on everything. They don't have to. That's nothing. Yeah.
It's food
anybody
for thought,
could be wrong. So that's okay.
Yeah.
Oh, and that means including me, by the way.
Yes.
Anybody could be wrong.
Well, again, thank you for joining us today. It was truly a pleasure.
Yes, thank you, Alan. And thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Oh, and that's The Business of Theater, a Working Title. I'm Darnelle Radford.
Twice.
And we will see you at the theater. Thank you for listening. Tune in next time for another episode of The Business of Theater, a Working Title, with Darnelle Radford and Mitch Weiss. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Share the podcast with a friend, colleague, or give us some social media love. This podcast is an Emory production. Visit us online at em3ry.com/TBOT. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at em3ryotm.